Fight Island, so I assume it's a little bit different, right? You don't have quite the heat, but still
Yeah.
Vegas, it seems like, at the end of the day, a hotel room is a hotel room.
That's exactly it, man. It's funny when we go on these trips, and I've been all over the world with the UFC, but people think you go to these crazy locations, but man, it's just a hotel room at the end of, especially in quarantine, So, yeah, it's a lot of looking out windows to the outside more than anything. But yeah, this is my second week in a row out here. I had Mallory Martin last week. I have Shauna Dobson this week, and yeah, back to back weeks out here. We call this hotel the Quarantine Inn. We get a lot of time in this place. So
How many COVID tests have you done now? If it's been 2 weeks, I assume you have tons of them last week, got tons of them this week. At this point, you must become the expert. Like, you take the swab and you do it yourself at this point.
yeah, so normally for these fight weeks, they send us one. We have to do a mail-in one before we come out, which is smart, and then you do two when you're here. One right when you get here, and then the second one is after weigh-ins before fight day. So it's usually about 3 per event. I took my 27th COVID test this morning. So waiting on results tomorrow. I haven't had COVID yet, so knock on wood. I'm still ducking and dodging. I'm trying to get to Habib's record here, so we're close.
There we go. Has it gotten annoying yet, or have you gotten to the point where it's just like, you know what, I'm just doing it? And at the same time, it must be kind of a relief too to know, like, in real time, whether you're managing to avoid it or not.
It's nice, yeah, you're exactly right. Like, we're not having to pay for these tests, and so, and it's given me real-time results. So I do appreciate that fact. At this point, almost 30 tests in, it's just part of the business now. You know what I'm saying? So we go down there. It's quick. The UFC has a really great setup. They've done a fantastic job with this, despite, I know people always have their opinions on what the UFC is doing, but in terms of COVID testing protocol, I think they've done a really great job. And I've been out here. I think my first one was like June of last year, or no, sorry, July. So I've watched their COVID testing protocol evolve over the last 6 months, and it's gotten there every single time I've been out here. So props to them for doing that.
I have to say, I'm a little bit disappointed they changed the test a little bit, because it was kind of fun watching these, big, strong fighters like punch people in the face, squirm and have to hold nurses' hands and stuff like, and get real scared when you see the thing go into their brains. And now we don't hear about it anymore. That was a fun. I enjoyed asking fighters about it, and some of them gave me cool answers, and some of them were like, "Yeah, I was crying doing that test."
Yeah, so they switched it actually. They started by doing the nose tests, and then basically what they found out was that the majority of people, that the fighters that they're testing, have broken their nose before or have a broken nose, and they have to redo it, or they have to go to the other nasal. It just doesn't work out. So out here, at least, they're all oral tests, which makes it a little bit easier. It's still not super comfortable, but in my opinion, I've done both. I would rather have the oral than the nasal for sure. The nasal one's rough.
Oh yeah, I did that one once before going back to the United States, and there's this old lady that comes out from doing the test, and she's like, "Oh, it was no big deal. It was like a tickle." So you see this old lady, and you're like, "Hold on, I'm a big strong guy. Like, if
Yeah,
she can do it. She looks pretty frail, man. I'm not gonna lie to you. That hurt. Like, it felt like
dude.
the swab goes in. It feels like it's parting your nostrils, and it's like, and you feel like they're going around and they're just playing around. Then they did the
Right?
second one too, and I was
Oh,
like, "Oh, stop!" And I think I had tears come out and everything, because you start playing around
yeah.
with the nose a little bit,
It's
and
rough, man. It's
oh,
rough. They get all the way up in there with that thing.
that's the
So
thing. People are like, it feels like it's tickling your brain, and you're like, nah, come on. But then when you see this huge thing go all the way down like that, and it's like, oh man, I even put it on Facebook. I was like, I did it, but it hurt. Like, I'm man
yeah.
enough to say, like, that thing surprised me. It hurt.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. They'll get you with it.
But so, what are you doing as a coach to kind of avoid catching COVID? Because for you, like, you have to be extra. You won't be able to coach. You might get a fighter forced to pull out of his fight. Like, you have extra, and even some people, whether they believe in it or not, or anti
Yep.
whatever, like, you do have like a real thing where you have to be careful, because you could, cost these people. I don't want to say their livelihood, but kind of mess with what everybody's doing a little bit if you're not careful.
It definitely is. You're exactly right about that, man. And that's something that we have to keep in mind. We have a big team. Anytime we have a big group of people, there's a diverse set of opinions, right? Like, yes, some people are going to believe that it's a serious thing. Some people are going to believe it's a hoax or whatever, right? Our job is not to dig into politics with our athletes, right? Our job is to prepare them for fights. So at the end of the day, you're just like you said, look, whether you guys believe in it or not, this can affect people's paychecks, right? And we saw that happen last year. Drew Dober's fight with Diego got canceled in November. Curtis's fight got canceled and postponed till this, and man, if you talk about both of those guys winning their fights and possibly getting a fight night bonus, we're talking about a couple $100,000 right there, right? Now, yes, the fights do get remade. Curtis is fighting this weekend, but that's never a guarantee either, right? Until that fight actually happens, you never know, right? So our job is to make sure that they make it to their fights. Whether you believe in COVID or don't believe in COVID, that's an irrelevant issue. We want to make sure our guys stay safe and make it to the fights and they get paid, So, just like you said, my job as a coach, I'm interacting with these athletes on a daily basis, but really outside of that, I'm not doing anything. I'm either at the gym or I'm at my house, and that's about it. I'll go to the grocery store, in kind of odd hours to get my stuff once a week. So I make, look, I think that's probably the right thing to do anyways. So I make my sacrifices with that, but my goal is all focused around the athletes and making sure that they get paid and they make it to their fight. So I'm totally fine making those sacrifices for them to make sure we get where we need to go.
I mean, that's got to be tough for a coach too, because nobody kind of sat you guys down and tell you like how important it would be for you guys to keep yourself safe. At the end of the day, everybody was talking about the fighters, but you guys are in contact with them every day. And even we saw Jeff Neal wasn't able to have his coach in the corner, and he mentioned how much it affected him. So it's crazy. Just you guys do have like a lot of factors in there with something like this.
It's big, man. You're exactly right. And you would want to believe that your fighter's in such a mentally strong place when they get ready to fight that if anything happens, it's not going to affect them. But the reality of it is that, you've trained with this person, you've trained this athlete for 8, 10, however many weeks, right? And then for you to miss fight week all of a sudden, that takes a big psychological impact on that athlete, whether they want to admit it or not. So we do our best to avoid that situation. It's just not something we want to find ourselves in, even though it's a reality right now. So we're doing the best that we can.
So one thing I want to get your take on, we saw Cub Swanson put out a tweet saying he felt like all the media should take at least 3 amateur fights, stuff like that. I didn't realize he was going to start the forest fire that he did of all the media taking offense. Some guys are trying to fight each other and stuff like that. For you as a coach, I mean, you deal a little bit with the media, the athletes and stuff like that. What's your take on that? You think that's the right move? Is there like an in between? What did you think when you first saw that tweet?
Yeah. Look, man, at the end of the day, man, there are coaches in this sport that have not competed. There's coaches, I can name a couple of them that never fought before or fought very little, and are very successful. Firas Zahabi is a great example. He had 5 amateur kickboxing fights. He never fought MMA, right? He's a very high level black belt too, but he had 5 amateur fights and he went on to produce world champions, So there's always people that you can point to, Do I think that it would help them have a better understanding of things that go around the sport? 100%, right? If every media member had to go through a weight cut, they had to go through the training, they had to go through the actual fight itself, whether they won or lost, it doesn't matter. Would they have a better understanding and appreciation for the sport? 100%. I don't think that's their job, though, at the end of the day. There's plenty of people who make strong analysis of the athletes and about the sport that I don't think they need that experience necessarily. If guys volunteered to go take fights, to get a better understanding, I would support that 100%, but I don't think it's a requirement. It's just, I see where he's coming from. I definitely see that side. I've competed myself. I've fought plenty of times. I see that side of things, but I have also seen a number of people who can be successful closer to the sport than the media themselves that haven't competed, so I see both sides of it. I'm going to lean towards the other side of it from Cub. I don't think it's required. I think it would be helpful. I would support people who did it. I don't think it's necessary. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, first, I understood where his tweet was coming from because fighters always feel like they get the unfair criticism, right? Like, they get knocked out or something. And these guys have never gotten off the couch and thrown a punch or, after them and stuff like that. I feel like it's extreme, though. Like 3 amateur fights, like most of the media members, like fighting's not for us. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason we cover it. And we're not out there trying our hand at fighting and stuff like that. I feel like, though, it depends on the role. Like, if you're an analyst, like someone like Luke Thomas had reached the point where he has an understanding of the fight game that whether he fights or not, like you feel like he kind of has it. And there, Dan Tom as well. There's a few guys who they have that understanding, but certain analysts, I feel like it would benefit them to fight and not so much to see what it feels like to get punched in the face, but to understand, terms like angles and stuff like that because they used them because they went out there and kind of figured it out. So I think in that sense it could be helpful, but it's not for everybody. Like you imagine someone like Ariel Hawani, right, getting into a fight.
Yeah,
Like nobody imagines Robbie Barstool, right? These guys,
yeah,
it's like these guys aren't fighters. That's why they're covering the fight. So I
right.
put it on Twitter, but I was like, I feel like a lot of people would get hurt trying to get those three amateur
I,
fights in.
I agree. And you know what? At the end of the day, I think it would be helpful if all of them trained to some extent, right?
Right. Good
Because
point. Good
there's
point.
still a lot that you can learn about the sport. You can spar, you can roll live in jiu-jitsu. You'll still feel some of that stuff without having to have the pressure of competition, where you'll still get a better understanding of the sport and a better appreciation of the sport and what the fighters go through. So fighting, I don't think it's required. I think it would be worth their time to train a little bit in one of the disciplines because look, at the end of the day, it benefits them anyways, right? It's going to help their overall lifestyle anyways, and they'll have a better appreciation for the sport. So required? No. Would it help them? 100%.
Good point. The training is a good point 'cause I feel like you don't necessarily need to compete to understand, right? Like just doing a little bit of boxing, jujitsu, whatever it is, Muay Thai, like you
Yep.
get that understanding, and maybe by training, when you're watching this fight, you understand more. But for certain, like say me for example, I interview a lot of fighters. Like, would taking those three amateur fights would it change what I'm saying during the interviews and stuff? Maybe a little bit. Maybe some questions get specific, but if you think about it, I don't know that it would do a whole lot extra just because I competed in three amateur fights.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm with you on that.
But I saw Matt Brown was like, they'll find out what it's like to get punched in the face, and they'll realize it's not so bad. I have gotten punched in the face, and I had so much adrenaline, I felt nothing. A
Yeah.
couple hours later, I felt like I got hit by a train, but I ate some shots. I didn't, no, I didn't even know about half of them. Just I didn't feel nothing.
Yeah, look, adrenaline is a hell of a drug, man. It'll get you through some crazy stuff, and it's part of the reason why you see guys take shots in fights sometimes and wear them so well, but that's kind of part of it too, though, where yes, in a fight you would have the adrenaline, but in sparring in the gym, you may not have that every single time, and you'll feel those shots. Of course, you're wearing bigger gloves and you're wearing shin guards, but you'll still feel the weight of those strikes, and you go, man, this is something serious. It'll give you a better appreciation. The adrenaline definitely carries you through a lot of stuff, and it can mask the pain. But sometimes in the gym, you don't have the luxury of having the adrenaline, and you'll get a little bit more realistic feel of it too. So, yeah, I think benefit on both sides of that.
And so let me mention this too. Like I feel like the fighters are like, oh, the media criticizes. I feel like a lot of guys mistake like random fan on Twitter for media as well.
Yeah,
Like any idiot gives their opinion. And it's like, who do you cover MMA for? Nobody. He's sitting there drinking beer and watching the fights like a regular guy. Like that's not media. Like maybe it'll benefit him, but no, I don't feel. I feel like the media is critical, and sometimes you do look at it like maybe it's a little bit too much. But I'm not sure they're as critical as the fighters think they are. But I'd be curious to get your take on it because you are kind of stepping away from it a little bit in the fact that you're not, media or a fighter in this kind of situation.
yeah. Look, I get that side of it for sure. Like I know the amount that goes into preparing for a fight. I fought myself, like I said. I had about 20 fights or so. And when you lose or you don't perform how you feel, is best, it really hurts. And then someone else, whether they say something nice or not that nice, but they pile on top of it, it definitely sucks, and you're sensitive to that. So I do understand that. On the other side of it, it's part of what we signed up for, right? When you compete in these sports, fighting to me is one of the most vulnerable things that you can do, right? Because you get out. I was talking about this with Mallory Martin, who just fought this past weekend, right? She lost pretty quick to Pollyanna. She made a small mistake. Pollyanna capitalized on it. There's no other sport where you train for that long, right? And the fight can be over instantly. You look at football, you look at basketball, you look at soccer. There's half times, there's timeouts, right? If you're fucking something up in a basketball game, you still have 3 quarters after that, or you can call a timeout and say, hey, let's figure this out, right? Man, even in golf over 18 holes takes like 4 hours to play. You hit a bad shot, you still have time to walk up and find your ball and try to get yourself back together, right? Fighting's not like that. There's no timeout in fighting, right? And that fight can be over in 10 seconds. You can train for 3 months of your life and that thing is done, and that's all you can do, So it's a very intense feeling when that happens. and it's very hard for other sports and athletes to relate to that feeling. So I understand why fighters are so sensitive to that when people talk about their losses because of what they put into the training. But like I said before, on the other side of it, when you sign up to be a fighter, and it's not an easy life, but part of it comes with the criticism, not only from fans, but also from the media. It's just part of it. It's your guys' job to write these stories and analyze the fighters, and it's the athlete's job to do their best in performance. So it's part of it, man. It's just about keeping it in perspective and not getting too strung up over something you have no control over. You can't control what these guys are going to write. So you just have to focus on yourself.
So let me put this out there too. Like, if say like all the media were required to take 3 amateur fights, imagine someone goes out there, gets knocked the fuck out in the first round, all 3 fights. Who's going to take that person seriously again? Every time you try to
Right.
say anything critical, there's going to be a gif of you, flatlined on the floor with your
Yep.
butt in the air because, people are like, yeah, but aren't you the same guy that got knocked out? So it's just crazy how little things like that, like say you win, obviously it looks great. And then you sort of get in that fighter situation, you lose, everybody turns against you, you win. Oh, well, this guy can whoop some ass. Like it's pretty crazy just how quickly, there's always going to be a little something there.
It's a great point. Yeah, that's a good point, and that's why I think, look, if you guys wanted to be fighters, you would have signed up to be fighters from the beginning, right? If you wanted to be an analyst and a journalist, you signed up to be that, it helps to know some things about the sport, but competing and understanding the sport and writing about it are 2 very different things, so yeah, I don't see the benefit of it necessarily.
So some guys were mentioning like, what if we just got the media to fight each other? And then I'm like, now we're on to something. Like, and there are some guys that train that will fuck some people up, but you
Yeah.
get people with similar, weight classes with the similar kind of training, and we could be cooking with something here. I mean, you try to think of some of the dream matchups, like you get like a behemoth like Luke Thomas, and you try to think like who's another behemoth in MMA media, and we make some kind of crazy bare knuckle pay-per-view kind of situation going. But I feel like that's a fun idea. There's something
Yeah,
there.
there's something there, I think, like I don't know anything. I don't know the physical stats about the Mark Ramundis or the Akamotos. Like we're gonna have to get these guys on the scale and see where they're at right now. And but yeah, you're right. You could make a nice little 10-card matchup. An event there and put something together. Put it, do it for charity or something. And I bet you could get some good numbers on that.
And then you get the fighters to be the ones conducting the media, the interviews and stuff like that. They get it, they get tired of asking the same questions. Go ask these guys the same
Hey,
questions
that's a
every
good point.
time.
That's a good point. There you go. Let's just flip roles for a night, and see how it works out. Look, at the end of the day, it'd probably be everyone would have a little bit better understanding of the other person's job, and I think everyone would find out it's not as easy as it seems on both sides. Yes, fighting is a very tough job, but so is being a journalist and an analyst and a media member. In different degrees. They're different sports, or sorry, they're different jobs, but they're both tough. So I think everyone would end up with a little bit better understanding of everyone's work for sure.
I think what makes it, even like a bigger deal, I think is the fact that everyone has so much access to each other. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like anyone could contact anyone at any moment. Like, this really is a sport where a lot of guys aren't going through managers and agents. Like, they could shoot a fighter a text. Like, a lot of media members could have hit up Cub Swanson directly about that tweet. Not sure what they would have achieved by it except getting laughed at. But it's like, it's crazy how accessible everyone is to each other, especially when you compare NBA, NFL, all that stuff, where it feels like these guys don't have that much access to each other, or they're always going through someone.
Yeah, that's just the nature of the sport, man. That's another way that we're unique from some of these other sports. And, it can be a good thing sometimes, but it also can be a bad thing. We've seen that in other areas of MMA where, there's no barrier to entry really. There's no barrier to entry to be a manager. There's no barrier to entry to be a cornerman for a fighter, right? Perry is his girlfriend as the corner. You know what I'm saying? Like people have their cousin or their brother manage them who's never done any management work in their life before. Even you could pick up a microphone and a headset and then all of a sudden you're doing podcasting, and so there's an upside to it, but like you said, it's easy to connect with everyone, but there's downsides to that too, and that's where you kind of get some of this lack of education and misinformation in the sport as well, and sometimes it doesn't make us look as professional as other sports.
The barrier to entry thing is a good point. Sometimes I do feel like any idiot could just come in and do what I do. You know what I mean? Like figure out how to contact some of these guys, and all of a sudden it's like there you go, you're replaced by someone who maybe it turns out is better than you. Like or like you mentioned, seeing things like Mike Perry's girlfriend is cornering him and stuff like that. Just sometimes you do feel like if somebody really wanted to, they could just show up and start doing it.
Yeah, yeah, and look, to some of us who's like, we've put a lot of time into this sport, and there's a lot of guys who put in way more time than me. I'm still young in this sport, but to watch someone like Mike Perry bring his girlfriend in, and she's sitting in the same seat in the corner that we sit in to corner our fighters in. It's like, wow, man, that's pretty crazy. You would never see that in the NFL. You would never see that in the NBA, the NHL, whatever it is, So sometimes it makes our sport look a little worse than it is. But man, we're growing and we're learning. So, hopefully one day we can kind of correct that a little bit.
Well, was that something that really bothered you, seeing the girlfriend just take the corner like that? Like I know, Mike Perry sort of explained it later on, like, you know what, I don't like having a corner anyways. Like I want her to just sit there and shut up and stuff like that. But I assume for someone like you must have had different feelings than everybody else when you saw that.
Yeah, honestly, like I try to look at everything from both sides, like maybe there's always someone that you kind of want in your corner with these athletes where like it's like a comfort factor, like a lot of fighters will bring two coaches and they'll bring a training partner or a friend, someone that they can train with and warm up with and someone they just enjoy being around. I look at it from that angle, but at the same time, it's like, man, you didn't have, that was the only person you brought to the fight. And I know that she doesn't have the expertise to be coaching on that level. So to us, it just looks like you're making a mockery of the sport, right? The same person, like I said, that is sitting in the same chair that we use to corner is there cornering, and she has no reason to be there. Or no qualification to be there. She has a reason, I guess. Mike wants her there, but there's no qualifications. And sometimes it's like it can be a little bit insulting to the amount of work that other people put in. But at the same time, if that's what he wants, is what he wants. Until we can change something about the sport, that's what it's going to be like.
And I guess it must make it worse when you see him collecting. I think it was a random guy on Reddit that was willing to pay 5,000, right, to take
Yeah.
another spot in the corner too. And now it's
Yep.
like, what are we doing at this point?
Exactly, man. And look, I don't know Mike Perry, but I've watched him enough times to know like he's super talented. It's crazy. He's very good. What he needs is a coach. The problem is that I don't think he would respond very well to a coach. He's also the type of guy who seems like he doesn't want structure or need structure or want someone watching over him. So he's in kind of a weird position. I don't know, man. Yeah, I'm glad there's not more people doing it like he's doing it. You know what I'm saying? I'm glad it's just one person you can say, yeah, that's Mike Perry. He's doing whatever. I'm glad there's not more of those.
How would you as a coach handle like a Mike Perry situation? Like say he were to come in your gym and he wanted to work specifically with you. What would your kind of approach be in that situation? Because like the regular approach is not going to work with a guy like that.
Yeah, like I think if we sat down and had a meeting, I would just be very clear of how I operate as a coach, of what I expect of my athletes. And it would be real easy, man. Either he agrees to what we're going to do and we work together, or he doesn't, and it's best of luck. I've had that conversation plenty of times, and there's a reason why I like to sit down with athletes and we communicate and we talk before and we get our expectations on the table before we start working together. Like I said, man, look, I still have a lot of work to do in this sport myself. I'm young, there's a lot to be done here, but I also feel like I'm at a point where, I can pick who I'm working with a little bit more selectively now, right? I don't have to take every fighter that comes to me. And I've had a lot of conversations where I say, look, man, I don't think this is going to be a great fit for you or for me. And I think you'll be better suited somewhere else. That's no hard feelings. I'm just trying to avoid, a potential letdown or disaster down the road. At the end of the day, I want what's best for all of the athletes, and I may not be what's best for them. So we have a conversation first. If Mike was like, hey man, this sounds like exactly what I need, then cool, let's get to work. If he's like, I'm not going to do this, then it's like, cool, man, best of luck. hopefully I can help you find someone else that might fit what you need, and there's no hard feelings to it.
Well, when you have that conversation, what are some of like the red flag? Like obviously Mike Perry tells you I'm not going to do that. That's like you got the whole sign that
Yeah.
lights up like tell this guy to go home. But what are some things you kind of look for and you're like, you know what? Or a lot of stuff is based on gut feeling too, but what is it where you sort of start thinking, you know what? Maybe this isn't the right kind of situation with this person.
That's a good question. Look, man, this MMA gets real tricky because of in pro sports in general, but MMA in particular. As soon as money gets involved, right? When athletes start paying the coaches, it's almost like the coaches become employees of the fighter and not the other way around, right? Whereas in the NFL, if you have a head coach on a team, right, the players work for the coach, right? They work for the organization, but the coach is in charge, right? It's not always the case in MMA. Sometimes fighters have a tendency to say, hey, look, I'm paying you. You're going to listen to what I say and you're going to help me out with this, right? And that's a big red flag for me, right? And look, I'm always open to fighters making suggestions and say, hey, look, this works well for me. This works well for me. But for them to say, hey, I'm paying you and I want you to do this and this for me, I'm usually like, that's cool. You can take your money somewhere else. I don't need your 5% to go through that. I'm not doing a song and a dance over here for you when you want me to. Outside of that, I try to make everything as clear as possible. Training schedules, my expectations, what I would like to see happen. I usually ask my athletes, if we're going to work together, I ask for a 2-fight minimum. So, I've seen a lot of guys, they'll come to a new camp, they'll transition, and transitions are always tough. You get to a fight, you're still kind of in the middle of a transition. And guys lose sometimes in the middle of transition, and then they'll leave. They'll go, oh, this doesn't work for me. That to me isn't fair. So one of the things right off the bat, I'll say, hey, we're going to work together for 2 fights, right? Just to make sure you're here for enough time that I can invest in you and you can invest in me and we can see some growth, because 1 fight's just not enough to make any sort of measurement off of. And then outside of that, like I said, it's just basic training schedule and stuff. If you feel like this is going to be too much work for you, if you feel like this is not your cup of tea, that's all good, man. Like I'll help you find another coach, there's no hard feelings and we can just go separate ways. I do like, and especially if you're going to have me as your head coach, some guys I'm their striking coach, some guys I'm their striking coach and their head coach. Right. And obviously the head coach position is going to be a lot more involvement. I'm going to oversee a lot more stuff. I'm probably going to ask a little bit more of you as the athlete, so that position I really reserve for only a very few people that I really know I work well with, and they're going to trust me. Trust is a big one. If you don't have the trust of the athlete, then on fight night, you're not sure what's going to happen. You have to make sure that athlete trusts you fully and they believe in you to go to battle with you. So I reserve that spot for a very few amount of people that I know we can build a strong foundation of trust on.
And I assume the fact that you're in Colorado too, that's got to play a role in it too, right? Because guys, they show up and they might think they have good cardio, and then all of a sudden they get less oxygen, and it's like, it's like
Yep.
if you really want it, like you're gonna make it work here. And I feel like and like you mentioned with the at least 2 fights, imagine you get caught in the first fight, and then the guy like kind of blames you for it and leaves. But you felt like you guys were working on, like there was something that was happening, like there's some magic happening here, and you're about to ruin it, like. It is definitely, but the fact that you're in Colorado alone, that must make some guys intimidated just with the elevation.
Definitely. And and we have a policy at our team, when guys come to check the team out and kind of try out in the sorts, we always tell them to come out for 2 or 3 weeks just to check things out first. That first week, you're not going to get a lot out of training, just like you said, it feels like you got a bag over your head and you're just trying to survive, so the first week is kind of acclimating to the elevation, getting used to that. And then 2 and 3, we can really start to see a little bit more about what the athlete what they're actually working with and stuff like that, So we always tell them, come out for a couple of weeks, get adjusted, take your time getting to know the team, the training schedule, the coaches, and then we can make a decision off of that. Sometimes we get through that 3 weeks and we say, hey, look, I don't think this is going to be the best fit for you, or the athlete tells us that they say, hey, look, I'm looking for this and I didn't see it here, and that's totally cool too. Our job is not to accept every single fighter who inquires about our team. We want a successful team with a big diverse group, but the team is not for everyone, and that's why there's so many great MMA teams around. Man, Factory X is 4 miles down the road from us. They're close. So we see a lot of guys that start there and come to us. We've had plenty of guys who started with us and went to them. And that's just the nature of it. It's the same thing as like ATT and Hard Knocks down in Florida. They're right down the road from each other. You get a lot of back and forth with those guys. That's just kind of the nature of the sport, but not one place is not going to be for everyone. We want to make sure that we have the right ones there that want to be there, and that the coaches and the other fighters want them to be there too.
So this past week, you posted a photo of Corey Sandhagen wearing, I don't even know how to describe whatever you want to call that, telling us it was fashion sweetie. What on earth is Corey Sandhagen out here wearing? Like, is this something you guys see a lot? This fashion choices and stuff. Like, is he trying to be an NBA player?
So what I really, on it, so I think that picture was from Abu Dhabi when he fought Marlon. So I think that was his mask, and he took his mask and pulled it down. So it looked like a scarf, right? But I think it was really just the timing of the picture and the pose that he had that was just hilarious, man. Like if you ever see Corey outside of fight, like fight week, he's the most unassuming guy ever. And matter of factly, he dresses like a nerd. He'll wear his shorts, he wears his like calf high socks. He's got like these old school Vans that he wears, and he usually has a hat on, and it's like he's got his vibe around him, but it's nothing like pretentious or flashy or anything. So, man, I think that picture was just timing, and it was perfect, man. I'm going to hold on to that one for a while. When he gets the belt, that one's going to resurface. I can guarantee you. I'm going to put that one back up once he wins the belt.
It was perfect. 'Cause even the way he looks at the camera, he almost looks offended. Like, you don't like this bright yellow shirt with the scarf? Like, what's your problem? Like, everything about it was excellent.
It was perfect. Yeah, the timing was perfect. It's one of my favorite pictures. So, yeah, we'll be seeing that one again in the near future for sure.
So how much work do you do with Corey Sandhagen? Because I know you're surrounded by a lot of these fighters, right? Because you also have Trevor Whitman, but you don't necessarily work with everyone. What's kind of your involvement with Corey Sandhagen?
Yeah, so it's kind of an interesting dynamic at our team, and it's a good thing too. Like there's a lot of coaches, there's a lot of athletes, and not every coach works with every athlete. There's a big benefit to that, right? Because if we have 8, 9, 10 coaches on our staff, right, guys get to train with all of them, pick and choose, which style they feel like suits them the best, And the nice thing is too, they can change their coaches from camp to camp as well, right? If Corey's facing a real grappling heavy opponent his next fight, he may want to switch a jiu-jitsu coach out, right? Or work with them a little bit more specifically for that fight. And that's totally fine, So you see some of these some of these teams maybe with like 1, 2, 3 coaches, 1 striking coach, 1 head coach, 1 jiu-jitsu coach, and that's what you get. And you better hope that you work well with that person. We have options at Elevation, which is really great. It's been shown to work very well. And that's why it's sometimes tough. People always ask me about this, right? You'll see Curtis fight. Like I'm not in Curtis's corner this weekend. I'm buddies with Curtis. I've cornered Curtis in the past, but he'll have his coaches. Cody Donovan is one of his head coaches. Vinny Lopez is his striking coach, and he'll have 2 training partners too. Shauna Dobson, she'll have me as her head coach. She'll have Valor Caballero as her jiu-jitsu coach. And then she has Aaron Porter, who's one of our strength and conditioning coaches out here as well too. So we have a diverse and a big staff of coaches just so we can help these athletes as much as possible. So in terms of Corey, I'm not working with Corey as much as I used to. Christian Allen is his head coach. If you haven't heard Christian's name, it's because he never does interviews. He never talks to anyone, but he's a genius. He's one of the best martial arts minds in the sport, especially one of the best that no one's ever heard of. He's one of the best strikers I've ever seen. He's a high-level jiu-jitsu black belt. He's a high-level judo black belt. I think he has a karate black belt too. He's a literal ninja. And he basically gave Corey everything that he had and more. And Corey is kind of like the living version of what Christian created. It's really amazing what those two have. But Christian is his head coach, And then Carrington Banks is his wrestling coach / training partner. Carrington, you saw him in the corner of Usman this past weekend as well. He's one of Justin Gaethje's main training partners too. I'm really trying to get this guy into the UFC because he is an absolute stud. But right now, he's helping these guys out quite a bit, and obviously he's been successful helping these guys out. So Corey is just using Christian and Carrington Banks right now. Those are the two that he went with. He feels like he vibes with those guys really well, and he gets what he needs with them. The nice thing about Christian is he's a Swiss Army knife, right? He is a black belt and all that stuff, so he covers all the bases. There's not a lot of coaches who have that level of expertise. He covers it all, which is really awesome. And he started training Corey from the start. Corey and I started right around the same time, so we've been training together for about 12 years. But Corey started under Christian Allen, so Corey has been like Christian's protege over the last decade, and now we're really starting to see, like that all of that kind of come to fruition right now. So, I see Corey all the time. If he needs help, I'm there to help him. And we're friends. We were friends first. We'll be friends after this, before coaching and fighting. But yeah, right now he's working with Christian Allen and Carrington Banks. Those are his two main coaches.
Man, Corey had the entire internet divided with that big knockout, right? Like everyone's like, it's a picture perfect knee, the way his opponent fell, and then everybody's like, yeah, but it's Frankie. I don't know that I've ever seen. Well, it's been a long time since we've really seen like no one's allowed to make memes, and we love Corey, but we love Frankie. Like it was crazy seeing the reaction of everyone. It's like everyone loves knockouts until it's their guy getting knocked out.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think that knockout had Corey divided too. You saw Corey right after the fight when he was getting his hand raised. He was very emotional after that. He understood too. Like that's a legend standing across from me. And I've never heard a bad word about Frankie Edgar in my life. But man, at the end of the day, if there's the two people in the cage and one of them's Frankie, it's going to be you or him, and it better not be you. You know what I'm saying? So, he had that mentality going into that fight, and you just can't look at it as a legend across the cage from you. We've seen that happen in the past before, where people give their opponent a little bit too much respect because of the name standing across from them. Corey did just such a great job of kind of compartmentalizing that, of saying, when I fight, it's not Frankie Edgar, it's an opponent in front of me who's trying to hurt me, and I'm going to do the same thing. But after the fight, of course, when it was over, you saw that emotion that came from him. So yeah, even me, I'm like, fuck, I love Corey, and I'm super happy for him. That was the best knockout of his career, and I don't want to see that happen to Frankie Edgar either. I love Frankie too. He's a legend, but man, it's the fight business.
We saw Frankie Edgar do an interview afterwards where he kind of explained, like, I didn't realize what had happened. I didn't remember anything. And everybody was kind of like, oh my God, like, he must have done some huge damage, blah, blah. But I think people don't necessarily realize, like, getting knocked out, and especially when you go completely out like that, like, you're not going to remember. Like, a lot of guys kind of explain, like, 1 minute they're fighting, and next thing you know, there's like someone talking to them, and they're like, who are you? Like, I feel like people sort of turn that into a big story, when in reality, I think it's more common than people realize. Like, when you go down violently like that, there's a big chance that you're going to lose a lot of that memory and stuff like that. And we've heard it before, but it really sounded like everybody kind of jumped all over it. Like, oh my God, like Frankie, this, that. Like, I'd love to get your opinion on it, because obviously you're a striking guy. You've seen this a lot more than I have, but it did seem like people turned it into more than what it really was, I'm sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like, look, at the end of the day, anytime you get knocked out, right, your brain is moving violently in your head. And your brain is your memory processor and your hard drive, and if that thing you drop your hard drive on the floor, you're going to have some problems for a little bit, right? You're going to shake some things up. So, yeah, man, I've seen it happen. Unfortunately, I've had a couple of my athletes in the past where that's happened. They've been knocked out. We take them to the back room, and then all of a sudden they think they're warming up for their fight still. They're asking when the fight is, and it's brutal. It's very hard. It's very hard to see that, but it's part of the sport. Now, look, like in Corey's in particular, that wasn't just like a punch, that is a knee, right? And on top of that, it's Frankie Edgar moving into a knee that Corey's jumping into. So it's the car crash effect. And those are the most violent type of knockouts, is where they're moving at each other and one person gets the worst of it, So for the way the knockout was, I'm not surprised at that result at all. You know, it still doesn't make it any easier to hear what Frankie said in that interview with Brett,
Yeah.
but I'm not surprised about that, man. That was a flying knee to your head as you're moving in. You're gonna have some problems for a little bit after that for sure.
Well, what are you telling your athlete in that situation? They're in the back, they think they're warming up, like they were just out there fighting. Like as a coach, like that's a delicate situation, right? Like a lot of people always joke about, you got knocked the fuck out, but as a coach, you can't say shit like that. You got to be real delicate. Like, do you have sort of a strategy, or is it kind of in that moment how you need to respond to your athlete?
Yeah, I think it depends on the athlete, but it's tough, man, because look, one, you have to tell them, you have to get them to calm down. But two, if they don't know that they fought yet, they also don't know that they lost,
Yeah.
right? So that's the other part of it where you have to say, look, man, like the fight happened already, and you also got knocked out. You lost, right? You lost the fight. And that is when kind of like the second shoe drops, and they're like, oh man, like I've seen people get really sad. I've seen people get really angry. It's tough, man. It's a very like emotionally unstable moment. And our job as coaches really is just to kind of be there for them in the moment. There's nothing else we can really do about it. We have to be there for them as best as we can. We have to make sure physically they're okay. But it's something that they just have to go through, right? When it happens, is you have to let them know what happened, and you have to be there with them through that process. So it's tough, man, and I hope I don't have to go through that many more times, because I'll never be. I don't want to get used to having that conversation. I'll put it that way. You know what I'm saying? If I get used to having that conversation, I'm doing something wrong. My job, and I don't want to have to do that. So I'm hoping I don't have to have too many of those.
Speaking of which, as a head coach, do you ever have to kind of sit down with your athlete and talk about like how to handle a loss? Like you see a lot of guys are undefeated and some of them handle it well. Like two extreme examples, right? You have Ronda Rousey who lost, and then I think that was probably the worst way you could handle it. And then you have Dominic Cruz that showed up at the press conference, and and he's just being really honest, and everybody liked him more. Do you ever kind of sit guys down and it's like, listen, here's maybe the best way to handle yourself after that situation, or is it just something it just kind of happens?
Yeah, 100%, man. And I think that's part of being a professional athlete, is being able to handle the losses as well as the wins. But also something, just my coaching philosophy, that's what I expect from the athletes that I work with, is that we're going to handle that well. We understand that losing is a part of this sport, and it happens every fight. One person's going to lose, right? And we have to learn how to deal with those and accept those, and learn from them, and move on. And some losses are obviously tougher than others, right? I tell my guys a lot of times, right? There's a difference between losing and getting beat, right? You can lose a close fight that the judges screwed up the scoring on, and there's nothing you can do about that. It sucks. There's also getting beat, where Mallory got submitted by Pollyanna last week, and there's no two ways around that. That wasn't like a close fight or a bad scorecard by the judges. You went out there and you got beat, and you have and both of those losses, the emotions are a little bit different from those, from those results. But at the end of the day, like I said, it's your job as a professional athlete to understand that that is part of competing, and our job now is to learn from the loss and to go out there and get it back the next time. Hopefully we can use that for fuel. But personally as a coach, I don't like when athletes make excuses about losses. I don't like them going out and talking trash to their opponents or whatever it is. If you can find one excuse about a loss, you're going to find 1,000 more, and at the end of the day, the loss falls on you, and really it falls on the coaches. At least I believe that. Right. But the athlete also has to accept responsibility. And until you can accept responsibility for your performance, we're not going to be able to grow from it, so that's a big part of it for me. Look, man, one person that I think handles them really well, that's a great example, is Conor McGregor.
Yeah.
For all the pressure that is on him, for all historically the trash talking he's done in the past, man, anytime he loses, he handles it with a lot of grace. And that's something that's super important, and something that you can point at with my athletes to say, hey, look, this guy's at the top of the sport, and this is how he's dealing with it. So if he's dealing with it like that, you should be able to handle this at this level too.
For sure, I agree a lot with that. You're currently, so you're in this hotel room, you're quarantining, you have fight week. Did you even unpack your suitcase when you went home? Like you must have literally went home like, oh, there's my house, and then you're like right back at it. Like you must not have had time for anything.
I didn't go home.
Oh, you didn't go.
So,
Yeah, so there you
so,
go. Even easier.
the UFC also has a hotel right next door to this one, right? Because these
Yeah,
trips are Tuesday to Sunday.
right.
So I would have landed Sunday afternoon. I would have been home Monday, and I would have had to get back on a plane again.
Yeah,
So
pretty silly. Yeah.
they just put me in the hotel next door for 2 days, and then I came back over here. So I've been living out of a hotel for 10 days already. It's just easier. It was tough because it was Valentine's Day.
Oh yeah,
Sunday was
yeah.
Valentine's Day, right? So I have my girlfriend. This is the second year in a row that I missed Valentine's Day. Last year I was leaving for New Zealand for the Auckland card down there in February on Valentine's Day, so I missed it then too. But I'm going to make it up to her when I get back. And this is just part of the job. Any coach will tell you, and especially guys who travel way more than I do, that this is just part of the job, and our significant others understand that, and they support that, as much as it's tough in the moment. They support us doing this, so I definitely appreciate that. Shout out to my girlfriend Abby for putting up with me with all this travel. But yeah, part of the job.
So this wasn't a strategic move to avoid buying the flowers and the chocolates. Like, oh, babe, we'll just catch it next year, and then next year you get
Yeah.
that fight book. Like, nah, it just so happens twice in a row.
That's one way to look at it. I can't say that publicly on air, but I like where your head's at. Saving
Yeah,
money while I'm doing it.
exactly. So what does the UFC tell you in this situation? Like, are they communicating with you? Like, hey, man, we're gonna put you in this hotel, or do you have to go through someone? Like, someone must be guiding you through this whole
It's
situation.
it's it's my fighters managers. They take care of it, right? So
Okay.
Mallory has she works with Danny Rubenstein at Ruby Sports. Shauna Dobson works with Oren Hodak at KO Sports Reps. So anytime, this actually happened last August too. They fought back-to-back weeks last year. Um, Same thing. So they both take care of my flights. They take care of the hotel, and they talk to the UFC for me. So all I have to do is show up. It makes it super easy. I really appreciate both of those guys. They go above and beyond to help us out and make it as easy as possible. There's a lot of roles in here, and sometimes you'll see an athlete try to take on too much, where an athlete doesn't want to pay a manager. So they're going to be the athlete, but they're also going to be the management, right? Or they make their coach do it. And then the coach is the coach and the manager. When I believe my coaching philosophy that, have someone for all of those roles and let that person focus on it. Let the coach focus on being the coach. Let the athlete focus on being the athlete. Let the manager handle everything else. In my experience, it tends to work best that way. And, so Mallory and Shauna both have great managers, and it makes my job super, super easy. They send me an email. Here's your reservation. I go check in over there, and I come back over here. It's all good.
So you do have Shauna fighting. Well, I don't feel like I saw her do a lot of media. Did she have a lot of media leading up to this fight? Because I feel like coming off what happened last time around, like everyone would have been jumping on. Like, let's go ahead and get this story out there.
She had a couple of podcasts here and there. She's got some media tomorrow with UFC. I think they're going to hype it up a little bit. They put up a Instagram post about her today. But yeah, man. It's funny. She's actually the underdog for this fight again too. So against Casey, who hasn't even fought in the UFC yet. I know she's talented. She's undefeated. But look, at the end of the day, fighting in the UFC is a different beast. And you can say whatever you want about it. You can practice as much as you want, but the second that they call your name and you have to walk out those doors at the Apex or wherever we're fighting, it's a different animal, every single time. And you get in that cage and Bruce Buffer's in there, you're like, whoa, this is different, And Shauna has grown up in the UFC from Ultimate Fighter to fighting everyone else. She's lived in the UFC. So yeah, man, she's the underdog again. It's right where we want to be. We love being in that position, and we've seen what happened before. So, we're not going to be surprised on Saturday. I'll put it that way.
That's got to be a little bit annoying too. Like everywhere you go, it's like underdog this, underdog. Like last time, you were the biggest underdog in history. It's like I appreciate you guys talking about me and stuff, but I don't know if that's necessarily something you want people like singing your praises about how you were this huge underdog, and now they're putting you as an underdog again. Like I feel like at some point it's got to start being a little bit annoying.
Yeah, we've had that talk before because, what I think it just comes down to is a perspective thing, right? Like you can say, hey, look, someone needs to put some respect on my name for what I've done. Or you could say, cool, let them keep sleeping on us, let them underestimate us, and we're just going to keep proving them wrong, And that's kind of the mentality that Sean is in, early on, that first fight with Agapova last time, she was like, man, like these odds are crazy. Like, no one really believes in me. And we really had to do a lot of mental work to say, look, like, you've been here, you've earned this spot here. You've been here longer than she has, and just trust in yourself. And she did that last time, and now she has that confidence. Like, man, I do belong here. I'm with a great team now. I know what to do in this fight, and I don't care what the odds say anymore. Like, I know what I'm capable of doing, and I'm going to go out and do it when I fight. So to her now, the odds are just a number on the side. And really it's a way for her friends and family to make some more money on her. So it's a good thing because she changed her perspective on it.
That last fight was a great example of, how fans, how quickly they turn on fighters, right? Like, what was her opponent's name? Maria Agapova, I believe. Like,
Yep.
she had all this hype heading into that fight. Everybody was talking about, look, everything she did, right? She's awesome. And then after the fight, like, I don't think I've ever seen someone turn on a fighter so quick. She was doing this little dance before the fight. Everybody's clowning her about that. Like, everybody's talking about this. It was like, man, she did the same shit the fight before, and you guys loved her for it. Like, it's just crazy how, people say, keep that same energy. They don't keep that. And it's awesome for Shauna, but at the same time, it's like, that as soon as you lose, like, the way people drop fighters like that, it must be pretty scary as an athlete to see stuff like that.
It's crazy, man. Like, it's so true that you're only as good as your last fight in terms of what the fans think, the big thing is this: if you care what the fans think, then it's going to really affect you. If you don't care what the fans think, and that doesn't mean you don't appreciate the fans, it's different, right? But the fans don't know the ins and outs of the fight game, right? Mallory just lost, she told me after the fight, she's like, man, people are pouring it on me on Instagram. I was like, man, I don't care. The boos always come from the cheap seats. You know what I'm saying? Those people won't step into the cage and do what you just did, right? So you pay no attention to them. You block, delete, repeat. Just keep rinsing and repeating with that. You know what I'm saying? Like, their opinion doesn't mean anything. Appreciate the fans that stick with you and just keep proving them wrong next time. But, man, if any of these guys let those opinions get to them too much, it can be a problem, so appreciate the fans, the good ones at least, right? And the ones that have shit to talk. And like you said, man, I've seen the screenshots of some guy worshiping one guy, just like you said, one fight, and the next fight he loses, it's the same guy trashing him. It's just how some fans are, they're super, they're fickle, and I don't know what it is exactly, but you just can't pay too much attention to those people.
And that's the accessibility thing, right? Like, the fact that people feel like they can reach out to a fighter like that, and they're going to read the message. Like, I'm sure if I sent LeBron James a hateful DM, like, he's never going to see that. But I could send something to, like, Mallory, for example, and there's a much higher chance that she's going to see it. And it's like, a lot of guys that get so big they can't see it, but fighters, like, they see so much of it, when in reality, it's like, that's not good for anybody. It doesn't matter where you are or what you're doing. Like, if you got a bunch of people telling you suck, even though you may think that I kick all of their asses, there's a part of you that's like, I'm not trying to hear that I suck after everything.
Yeah, man. Like, especially when you're in kind of like an emotional state after taking a loss, where you're doubting yourself. Every fighter goes through that when they lose. They're like, man, am I good enough to be here? Like, do I belong in the UFC? That narrative happens every time a fighter loses. And then for 1,000 other people to pile it onto them after, even if they don't know them or it doesn't, they're keyboard warriors, it still has an effect, So fighters just have to be very careful with their social media after fights. And, man, it works the other way too. After wins, everyone's going to sit there and gas them up and say, oh, you're the greatest, this and that. And that can go to your head the wrong way too if you're not careful, right? You can get overconfident in yourself. You can start believing in that hype, right? You may start training less. You may start feeling yourself. And man, that's going to come back to bite you in this sport too. So you really have to take what the fans say with a grain of salt. Like I said, positive or negative, it's their opinion doesn't matter. Their support matters. Their opinion doesn't necessarily matter.
It kind of reminds me of Tyron Woodley a little bit, right? Where we saw him beat Darren Till, and all of a sudden, he's the next GSP. He's actually the greatest fighter that we've ever seen. And, we weren't giving him his respect and stuff like that. Like, everybody was like, Tyron loses one fight to Kamaru, and then all of a sudden it's like, we knew Tyron this and that. It's like, wait a minute. And now Kamaru's on that same train too, where everybody's talking about him in GSP. So it's just crazy how, everybody goes through that kind of cycle.
Watch when Hamzat loses,
Oh, yeah.
He'll lose, he'll lose. And watch when that happens, the same people that were hyping him up from his first couple of fights are going to be the same ones jumping off the bandwagon. So yeah, it's the nature of the sport.
Well, that's the thing too, right? Like you see a lot of the fighters that become stars and stuff like that. They have like a sense of like you can't they're unbeatable, right? Like John Jones, obviously he has the Matt Hamill throwing his head into his elbows, all those jokes with that one. But Conor McGregor lost in Cage Warriors, but we everybody forgot that when he got to the UFC, and then he loses to Nate, and then things got different. Like you feel like for a lot of these guys, until you lose, you create sort of this aura, and then the second you lose, like that's where everything changes. And I think we're gonna see something like that for someone like Hamzat, where right now he's the greatest of all time. Like I put that it's not crazy to think that Kamaru could eventually catch GSP someday, and everyone's like, well, he won't because Hamzat fights him next. I'm like, no, not. I mean, maybe eventually, but not right now. Like, look, he's coming off of a middleweight fight against Mearshart. Like, all credit to Mearshart. He's a good fighter and everything, but it's like you can't just give him a title shot coming off of that. Like, it's crazy the way people hype up, so especially the undefeated guys.
100%, man. And look, like losing is very important. We talked about it earlier. You have to know how to lose. Like there's a reason that, some of my amateur guys, my higher level amateur guys, I want to give them really hard fights before they turn pro, right? Because you have to learn how to lose. The last thing you want is a kid who's 5-0 as an amateur, and then he goes 5-0 as a pro, and you haven't felt a loss yet, man. A loss can really change you. It'll really shatter you. I remember the first time Corey lost in his pro career against Jamal Emmers, and that was in RFA or LFA back in the day, and that really affected Corey, man. That I don't think he fought for like 8 months or something after that fight. Like it really changed his psyche. Losses can really affect people, especially after they've gone on a long run of winning. Like you have to know what a loss feels like, and you have to experience that before you get to a high level. You get to a high level and you haven't lost yet, man, it's almost too late, and that can really change your career. Habib got away with it, and hopefully he doesn't come back. He might, but I don't know. But he's one of the few that got away with it, and I'm sure he's lost maybe in the past as an amateur or whatever. He's experienced loss before for sure. But man, it's important to know what that feels like before you get to a super high level in competition.
Or it's a good point about the amateur fights. Like I was talking to a prospect months ago, and his amateur record it was ugly. I mean, it was just distractingly ugly. It was like 8-10 or something. But he was like 12-0 as a pro or something. So it's like, hold on, like how did you make? How did you go from an amateur like this to a pro? And a lot of guys have said, that actually helped me as a pro realize how I need to do things or how to avoid losses and stuff like that. Like the amateur fights are super important for a lot of these guys. Like you mentioned, losing, like you saw Ronda lose for the first time in front of the world, and she wasn't able to handle it. While some guys, like, or what was it, Dominic Cruz, lost a part of life, loss happens, stuff like that. And that's how some guys take it when they know that it happens.
Exactly, man. And the guy with an 8-10 record, to me, if I see an amateur with that I don't see a losing record. I see 18 fights of experience. The experience as an amateur is what matters. It's not the record, because the record goes away. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter. It's weird, man. The U.S. and one or two other countries, it's one of the only few places in the world where there's amateur fights and then pro fights, and you can't go back and forth. A lot of other places, especially in Muay Thai, a lot of other places in the world, amateur and pro describe the type of fight, not the fighter, right? So athletes can go back and forth. They can fight amateur one weekend with pads on, right, and not get paid, and then they can fight pro the next weekend, and that allows them just to get as much experience as possible. It's a really cool concept, and it's something we haven't quite adopted here yet. It might not be a while till we do, but there's a reason all these other fighters overseas have so many more fights than some of our American fighters, is because they can get more experience. It shouldn't be, okay, you're an amateur and then you turn pro and you can't go back, and it's not like if you go back, if you fight an amateur fight, you're not fighting a guy who's fighting he's 0-0 next. You'll fight someone more experienced, but it's almost a separate discussion. But like I said, the amateur part of it, anytime I see amateur fights, all I see is experience. 8-10 means 18 fights of experience, and in those 18 fights, yeah, man, that guy learned how to lose. That guy probably learned how to pace himself in fights. That guy probably learned how to work out of bad situations. That guy learned how to capitalize when his opponent is hurt. All of these experiences you take to now when you turn pro, you have all that experience under your belt, and you've navigated those waters before. It's a great way to go, man. It's absolutely.
Before we wrap things up, I know people like to know the behind the scenes stuff. What does fight week kind of look like as you guys go along for both you and Shauna?
Yeah, man, it's these fight weeks are interesting. It's like there's a lot of downtime. We train once, maybe twice a day, but as the week gets progresses, the trainings get shorter and shorter, so the athletes can get rest. And so it's like it's weird. It's like a lot of sitting, a lot of waiting for the most 15-minute intense minutes on Saturday. And it's crazy that the fight is the shortest thing that we do all week, right? It's 15 minutes and then it's done. But it's also by far the most intense thing that we do. So it's a crazy week. Like, yeah, what's today? Is today Tuesday?
Tuesday.
Yeah, I've lost track of time and space being in this hotel, but like the fight is looming a little bit. It's on Saturday, but it's still a little bit of ways away. Like even on like Thursday, it's like we focus. We're starting to cut weight on Thursday. Like we're not focused on the fight just yet. Friday morning weigh-ins get done, and then it's like okay, now the fight is here. So yeah, man, it's a lot of waiting. Like tomorrow, we have to wait to get cleared. Make sure our COVID tests come back negative. We're gonna go to the UFC. Will take us over to Whole Foods so we can get some groceries for the week. Shauna has some media in the afternoon, and then we're gonna train at the Performance Institute, and then that's it. We'll be done. Thursday's an even lighter day. We're gonna train at the PI in the afternoon. That's really about all we have on Thursday. And then Thursday night we'll start the weight cut. Friday morning we'll weigh in. We have all of Friday to refuel and rehydrate. Saturday morning we'll do a shakeout, and then we're at fight night. And everything comes down to 15 minutes. The last 10 weeks come down to 15 minutes or less, and it's crazy, man. It's like I said, there's no other sport that compares to this. Just the amount of time that you're in the cage. Even if you fight 3 times a year and all 3 fights go the distance, that's 45 minutes of experience. Whereas you look at a basketball game, what is it? Is it 4 quarters, 15 minutes? Is it an hour that they
Four,
play?
4 quarters, 12 minutes, I believe. So
12
48
minutes.
minutes. Yeah.
Okay, right. So there you go. In one basketball game, they play longer than you would if you fought 3 times a year. So it's just crazy, man. It's a crazy sport, and but at the same time, there's nothing else I'd rather be doing. And I know there's nothing else that these fighters would rather be doing.
And there we go. That's a great way to end things. There's so much good stuff there. I feel like with coaches, like you learn so much. Like it's like you guys see things from a different eye, so it brings a lot of good perspective. Listen, to end these things though, I always like to leave the floor to the guests because you guys have social media. I'm sure sponsors, fighters, all that stuff. I'm sure you'd like to shout out, and I know you're very active on social media. So if you have anything you'd like to plug, now would be the time.
Awesome, man. Yeah, nothing in particular. Just a shout out to all the coaches on Elevation Fight Team and all the athletes who make it, a special place to train. Such a great group. Wins, losses, whatever it is. We're working through all that stuff together. So I'm honored to be a small part in that. And everyone who follows me on social media and tunes in to what I have to say. Appreciate you guys following along, and I'll do my best to keep you guys informed and entertained. So, and thank you for having me on, man. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for coming on. This was so great, and thank you everyone for listening. And hopefully we'll be back soon.